A little girl gave her last $5 to a broke stranger at the grocery store. He was actually a legendary biker leader who'd been hiding for 15 years. When dangerous men came after her family, 500 bikers showed up and they weren't leaving until she was safe. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like dying wasps. Nora James shifted her weight from one worn sneaker to the other, watching dust particles dance in the afternoon sunlight streaming through Miller's grocery store windows. The air conditioning had been broken for 3 days straight, and the heat made everything smell like overripe bananas in desperation. Next, the cashier called, her voice flat as roadkill. The old man in front of them shuffled forward. Nora noticed his hands first, scarred, weathered, trembling as he placed 3 items on the conveyor belt. A can of soup, a loaf of white bread, a small jar of instant coffee. The kind of shopping that told a story nobody wanted to read. He wore a faded denim jacket despite the heat and his gray beard needed trimming, but it was his eyes that caught Nora's attention. They were the color of a summer storm, sharp and aware like they'd seen things that would make most people look away. "That'll be $8.47, the cashier said, examining her pink acrylic nails. The old man pulled out a worn leather wallet and produced a debit card. His fingers shook as he inserted it into the reader. The machine beeped, declined. "Try again," the cashier sighed, already annoyed. He did. Same beep, same red letters on the screen. "Look, I don't have all day," the cashier said loud enough that the 3 people behind them shifted uncomfortably. "You got cash or not?" The old man's jaw tightened. There should be money in there." "My check was supposed to." "Yeah, well, it's not there now." The cashier reached for the items. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside." Nora watched something collapse behind the old man's eyes. Not anger, something worse. Shame. The kind that makes a person shrink into themselves like paper held too close to flame. Nibs presents. But what if one tiny act of kindness could unleash an army? Stay tuned. Her mother, Megan, touched her shoulder. "Honey, we need to." But Nora was already moving. Her hand dove into her pocket and emerged with a crumpled $5 bill. It was her money. The money she'd been saving for the class picnic next week. The money she'd earned by helping Mr. Patterson clean out his garage in 100-degree heat. "Wait," Nora said, stepping forward. She was small for 10, all elbows and knees and wild brown hair that refused to stay in ponytails, but her voice didn't shake. "I have money." The cashier looked at her like she'd just spoken Martian. "Kid, that's not enough." "Then I have more at home." Nora placed the 5 on the counter, then looked up at her mother with eyes that could melt titanium. "Mom, please. Can we cover the rest?" Megan James had exactly $23 to her name until Friday. The diner was bleeding money. The rent was 2 weeks late. But when she looked at her daughter, this fierce, impossible child who seemed to carry light in her chest where other people kept doubt, she couldn't say no. "I've got $4, Megan said quietly, fishing through her purse. The old man turned, and for the first time Nora saw his face properly. It was a roadmap of hard years and harder choices, but his eyes were suddenly bright. Wet. "No," he said, "you can't." "I can't let a child." "Please," Nora said simply. "Let me help." The word please did something to him. His whole body went rigid like he'd been struck by lightning. He stared at this little girl with her stubborn chin and her $5 bill, and something ancient cracked open inside his chest. The cashier took the money and bagged the items with theatrical irritation. The old man accepted the bag like it weighed $1,000 lobby. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice rough as gravel. "Nora James?" He nodded slowly, filing it away. "Red Dalton," he paused. You remind me of someone I once rode with. Someone who believed good people still existed." "Good people always circle back," Nora said. She didn't know why she said it. The words just felt right, like they'd been waiting in her mouth for this exact moment. Nibs asks, could a child's words awaken a sleeping legend? The danger is just beginning. Red's eyes widened. His hand, still trembling, reached toward her, then stopped. "I'm going to pay you back," he said. "I swear it. I don't know how yet, but I will." Nora smiled. "It's okay. Sometimes people just need help." As Red walked toward the door, he stopped, turned. "The someone you remind me of, her name was Sarah. She died believing I was better than I am." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. Maybe she was right. Maybe it's not too late to prove it. Then he was gone, disappearing into the harsh Arizona sunlight like a ghost, remembering how to become solid again. The cashier muttered something about wasting everyone's time. But Nora didn't hear it. She was watching through the window as Red Dalton walked down the dusty road, his silhouette getting smaller and smaller, the plastic bag swinging from his hand. "That was a kind thing you did," Megan said, pulling her daughter close. "He looked so sad, Mom, like he'd lost something important and forgot where he put it." Megan kissed the top of her head. "Come on, baby. We need to get home before the dinner rush." As they walked to their old pickup truck, neither of them noticed the faded motorcycle parked 3 blocks down, or the way Red Dalton stood beside it for a long moment, staring at Nora's retreating figure, his hands no longer shaking. He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a photograph. Edges worn soft from 1,000 touches. In it, a younger Red stood surrounded by men in leather vests, their arms crossed, their faces hard. But in the center stood a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Sarah," Red's thumb traced her face. "Good people always circle back," he whispered. "That's what you used to say." He looked toward the horizon where the sun was starting its descent, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. For the first time in 15 years, Red Dalton thought about going home, not to his trailer, but to the place he'd abandoned when honor became too heavy to carry, and guilt too sharp to hold. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of creosote and distant rain. Somewhere in the canyons north of Flagstaff, a steel whistle hung silent on a hook waiting. The Brotherhood didn't know it yet, but the signal was coming, and it would start with a little girl's $5 bill. The trailer sat at the end of a dirt road that had forgotten what maintenance looked like. Red's boots crunched on broken glass and scattered gravel as he approached the rusted metal box he called home. It leaned slightly to the left like a drunk trying to remember which way was up. He'd been walking for 2 hours. The motorcycle had refused to start this morning again. Just like everything else in his life, it was giving up on him piece by piece. Inside, the trailer was worse. A hot plate with 2 settings, barely warm and fire hazard. A mattress on the floor, 3 plates, 2 forks. One life that had somehow shrunk to fit inside 40 square feet of failure. Red set the grocery bag on the counter and stared at it. $9.47 worth of food that a child had bought him. A child who didn't know his name an hour ago. A child who'd looked at him and seen someone worth saving. His throat burned with something that wasn't thirst. He pulled out the whiskey bottle from under the sink. Jack Daniel's bottom shelf, his most consistent friend, but his hand stopped halfway to his mouth. Instead, he set it down and walked to the closet. The box was buried under 3 years of newspapers and shame. Red pulled it out, his back protesting. The dust was thick enough to plant crops in. Inside, wrapped in an old t-shirt, was the photograph he'd been carrying earlier. But beneath it were others, dozens of them. The history of something beautiful that he destroyed. Red spread them across the floor like tarot cards spelling out his damnation. There, 1998. The desert ghosts at their peak. 47 members, all standing in front of the canyon they'd claimed as their own. Every man was someone's son, someone's brother, someone's second chance at being part of something real. They weren't a gang. That word was too small, too dirty. They were a brotherhood. They'd started as veterans. Men who came back from wars overseas only to find they didn't fit anywhere else. Men who understood that sometimes the only family you get is the one you choose. Red's finger traced the faces. Tommy Wrench Martinez, who could fix anything with an engine and duct tape. Big Jim Thornton, 6'5" of gentle giant who cried at every wedding. Marcus Doc Webb, an actual doctor who wrote on weekends and never charged ghost members for medical care. And Sarah, always Sarah, standing beside Red, her hand on his shoulder. Not his old lady. She'd hated that term. His equal, his conscience, the woman who'd convinced him that strength wasn't about intimidation, but protection. "We ride for those who can't ride for themselves," she'd said once after they escorted a domestic abuse survivor 3 states away from her ex-husband. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us matter. Red's hands clenched into fists. 15 years ago, they'd organized the Desert Rally, a 3-day event that brought motorcycle clubs from 6 states together. It was supposed to be a celebration, a peace summit, proof that the clubs could coexist without territory wars and bloodshed. But Clint Dugan had other plans. Dugan was young then, hungry with eyes that looked at the Brotherhood and saw profit margins instead of family. He'd started pushing for the ghosts to expand their business opportunities. Code for drug running, protection rackets, the kind of poison that turned clubs into criminal enterprises. Red had refused. Sarah had refused. The old guard had refused. So Dugan made a deal with the Scorpions, a rival club from Nevada. During the rally's final night, while everyone was celebrating, Dugan's crew sabotaged 2 motorcycles belonging to ghosts who'd opposed him loudest. The brakes failed on a canyon turn. Sarah and Tommy never made it to the bottom. Red found out later, too late, that Dugan had orchestrated it, but the damage was done. The ghosts split. Some followed Dugan, believing strength meant ruthlessness. Others scattered to the wind, too broken to rebuild. A few tried to stay loyal to Red, but he was drowning in guilt. He'd been their leader, their anchor, and he'd failed to see the snake in their nest until it had already struck. So Red walked away, changed his name unofficially, moved to this forgotten corner of Arizona, and tried to drink himself into non-existence. The club fractured. Dugan took the name and twisted it into something dark. The Desert Ghost became known for extortion, for loan sharking, for making people disappear. Everything Sarah had died standing against. And Red became a ghost himself, haunting the edges of a life he no longer recognized. He picked up another photograph. The last good day. Sarah smiling at the camera, holding up a sign. Good people always circle back. It had been their motto, their belief, the thing that separated them from the darkness. Red's breath caught. Those exact words from a 10-year-old girl he'd never met before today. The universe didn't work like that. Coincidence wasn't that cruel or that kind. He stood, his knees popping, and walked outside. The sun had set, leaving the sky bruised purple and orange. In the distance, he could see the lights of Flagstaff twinkling like scattered stars. Somewhere in that town was a little girl who'd given her last $5 to a stranger, a girl who'd looked at him and seen something worth saving. Sarah would have liked her. The thought came unbidden, but true. Sarah would have loved Nora's fierce little face, her stubborn kindness, her refusal to walk past suffering. Good people always circle back. Red whispered to the desert wind. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to finish what should have been finished 15 years ago. Maybe it was time to come home. Behind him, inside the trailer, his phone, ancient, cracked, barely functional, started to ring. Red stared at it like it was a snake. Nobody had this number. Nobody called him ever. He answered, "Yeah." The voice on the other end made his blood freeze. "Hello, Red. Heard you're still breathing. Pity. We need to talk about a grocery store." Click. Red stood motionless. Phone pressed to his ear even after the line went dead. Dugan knew. Somehow Dugan already knew. The game had just changed. And Nora James, without knowing it, had just painted a target on her back. Nibs reveals, the past is hunting them both. Will the old leader rise? The James family diner smelled like coffee, bacon grease, and broken dreams. It occupied a corner lot on Route 89, the kind of place where truckers stopped for breakfast and locals gathered to gossip over pie that Megan's grandmother had made famous 30 years ago. That was before the new highway bypass, before her husband David's heart attack 18 months ago, before the world decided that small family businesses were quaint relics of a simpler time. Megan flipped the open sign at 5 a.m., same as always. The sun hadn't cracked the horizon yet, but habit was stronger than hope these days. Nora sat in the corner booth, working on her homework by the light of a flickering neon sign. She'd learned to do her schoolwork here mornings before class, afternoons after. Her mother couldn't afford babysitters, and Nora had never complained. Not once. "Mom, what's collateral mean?" Nora asked, looking up from a vocabulary worksheet. Megan's hands froze while wiping down the counter. "Why are you asking that?" "It's in my spelling list. Something pledged as security for repayment of a loan." Nora read the definition slowly. "That sounds complicated. It means something valuable you give someone to prove you'll pay them back," Megan said carefully. "Finish your homework, baby. Bus comes in 40 minutes. The morning passed in the usual crawl. 3 customers, $18 in receipts. The coffee maker made a grinding noise that suggested imminent death. The walk-in freezer was running on prayers and duct tape. By noon, Megan had counted the register 3 times, hoping the numbers would change. They didn't. She had $340 in the bank. Rent was $800. Due 5 days ago, the electric bill sat on the counter like a coiled snake. $267 final notice in red letters. And then there was Dugan. She heard his truck before she saw it. A black Dodge Ram with chrome accents that probably cost more than she'd make all year. It pulled up outside, blocking 2 parking spaces like it owned them. Clint Dugan stepped out wearing a smile that would make a shark jealous. Mid-40s Jim, fit with slick back hair and a leather jacket that probably cost more than her car. Two men emerged from the truck behind him, thick-necked, dead-eyed, the kind of men who got paid to make problems disappear. Megan's stomach turned to ice.